This is Gemara in Kiddushin, Daf Ayin Tes, and today's shir has been sponsored by a close friend of the Daf as an incredible schos, Refuah Shlema for Yoyel ben Frumit Eliza B'siyata Dishmaya. The learning the entire Chabura, the ultimate Kayach HaTorah, Talmud Torah Kenegei Kulam, should bring Yoyel ben Frumit Eliza a complete Refuah Shlema. He should come home very, very soon. It was so nice meeting so many of you. Baruch Hashem, celebrating. I mean, we didn't personally finish Nashim and Kiddushin, but with Klal Yisrael getting together, Baruch Hashem, hopefully it won't be 3.5 years before we do this again. We'll have to find another venue, maybe to make more of a private siyum. I don't know, but what's most important is hopefully we got some chizik. Hopefully we recharged our batteries a little bit. And now, let's pick it up. Daf Ayin Tes. We are holding on. Ayin Chesam and Veis. 4 lines from the bottom. Says the Mishnah, a Mishnah that perhaps will remind us of a bit of our Gittin days. Mi shenosan rishos l'shluchai. Someone gives permission to a shliach lekadish es bitoi, to marry his daughter, marry off his daughter, meaning to accept Kiddushin as a shliach. V'halachu, and he, the father, goes. V'kidsha, and he goes and he accepts Kiddushin on behalf of his daughter on his own. Paskins, the Mishnah, 2 lines from the bottom. If the fathers came first, Kiddushav Kiddushin, his Kiddushin is good. If the shliachs came first, Kiddushav Kiddushin. Case A, Yodua, and if we do not know which one came first, the fathers or the shliachs, says the Mishnah as we turn over to Ayin Tesam and Aleph, what do you do in a case of doubt? Shneim noisnim get, both he and both need to receive a get, both if they're going to come to marry someone else, both of the husbands, shneim noisnim get, they both give a get, and then they can move on. Vimratsu. Again, let's say it precisely. Imbasali nasi lacher. If she wants to marry someone else, Rashi's pointing out, then she needs to get a get from both prospective husbands. Imratsu, if they want. Echad noisin get, echad kaines. They want, one is allowed to marry her, and one could give the get. Case A of the Mishnah. Continues the Mishnah, case B, or we could call part B, v'chein. And similarly, so we know v'chein is going to be a bit of a mimicking of the part A of the Mishnah. Ha'isha shenasla rishos l'shlucha. If a woman gives rishos to a shliach, likadsha, to marry on her behalf, accept a Kiddushin from a man. V'holcha, and she goes on her own, v'kidsha is atzma, and she accepts Kiddushin on herself. Says the Mishnah, the same din as the Reisha. Im shelah kadmu, if hers came first, Kiddushin, her Kiddushin is good. V'im shel shlucha kadmu, if the shliach comes first, Kiddushav Kiddushin. V'meino yoidin, if we do not know, then what? Shneim noistin lagat, v'imratu echad noisin gav echad kainis. 2 parts of the Mishnah mimicking the same din, that we go based on whose Kiddushin came first, and Mesupik, they both need to give a get, or one gives the get in Kiddushin. And obviously, as we wonder of the fact that we have 2 identical cases in the Mishnah, begins the Gemara in Tesam and Aleph Usricha. Why do we need to have 2 identical cases? Explains the Gemara, Diashvin and Gabi Didei, we only said the Reisha. With regard to the father, I would have thought Misham de Gavra. Kim Lebe Yochsin, which of course is the reason why it says over here, because the man, the father, is precise with Yochsin, and that's why his Kiddushin comes first. Aval Itzah, when it comes to a woman, Kim Lebe Yochsin, that she is not careful, then maybe in part B of the Mishnah, even when hers comes first, that it's not a good Kiddushin. If he only said the Seifa, the second case of the Mishnah, I would have thought, Mishom de'isisa deiko min asva, because she's marrying someone on her own behalf, so she is going to be more precise, particularly in Yichsin matters. But the father, he doesn't care. Sricha, that is the reason why the Mishnah listed both cases in the Mishnah. We continue, says the Gemara Itmar. Kidsha avia b'derech, if the father married her off on the road, v'kidsha atzma be'ir, and she married herself off in the city, v'arehi boigeres, and she is a boigeres right now. So we have a machlekes Rav and Shmuel the din. We'll then develop what is the case, and then we'll understand what is the machlekes. Rav Amar says, Rav arehi boigeres levanenu. Says Rav, she is a boigeres in front of us. Ushmuel Amar Chayshina LeKedusha Yishenim, we are suspectful of both the Kiddushin of herself and of her father. So explains the Gemara, what is the case? Ebas, when precisely does this case happen of the father and she accepting Kiddushin? Says the Gemara, Elam, if you're going to tell me, Shisha, it's within the 6 months between Nairus and Gadlus. Hanim Arav Ari Bagaras. Lefanenu, could Rav say that Lamaisa, she's a Bogaris in front of him? How can you, in front of us, excuse me? How can you say that, Rav? Hashto de Gavra, only right now she became Debagra, she became a Bogaris. Because she never had a presumed assumption until this moment. Elachar Shishas must be after 6 months. What's the kasha on the flip side? B'hanei Shmuel, in this case, the Shmuel really say Chashinah Kedusha Sheineim. So what is the case? Again, that she went and she accepted Kiddushin, the father accepted Kiddushin, the end she is a Bogeres. We have this machlekes Rav and Shmuel. Ask the Gemara again, according to the Shmuel name Shmuel, Chashinah Kedusha Shneim. V'amar Shmuel, but Shmuel has priorly taught us, Ein beinairos lebagros el shish chadashim bilvad. So what is the case in which Rav and Shmuel are arguing? Says the Gemara, Leitzricha, you know what the case is? De Kaddish, you know when they got married? Behahu Yoima. On that precise day, de Mashlim Shisha. On the day that she becomes a Gedayla, on the day that she turns the leaf between Bagrus, between 12 and 12 and a half, and 12 and a half in adulthood, on that precise day. So how do we view the Chazakah on the day that the Chazakah changes? Rav Amar says, Rav Arehi Bagaris Lefanenu. Lemaisa, she's a Bagaris right now. Midahashta Bagaris. Besafra Nami Bagaris. For right now, she's a Bagaris. Then we can assume in the morning, says Rav, she was as well a Bagaris. And again, what's going on over here is that we examine her in the afternoon. We find that indeed she is a Bagaris. Shitas Rav. Shmuel Amar, no. Hashtu daisi simanim. Right now she bought simanim. Right now we know she is a Bagaris, but not prior. So that is the machlekes, says the Gemara, Rav and Shmuel. And as everyone can anticipate, this opens up the incredible Pandora's box of Chazakas. This incredible sukkah of when do statuses change, at what precise moment. So says the Gemara, let's begin by asking on Shmuel. We're about 10 lines from the wide lines, and Ayin Tesam and Aleph. First one in line is Siman. Asks the Gemara, Shmuel Maishinami Mikvah. According to Shmuel, how is this any different from the famous case of Mikvah? Titinan. As we learned in on the Ishna Mikvah, Shenimdad V'nimsa Chaser. You measure the mikvah and you find out that guess what? It's not a kosher mikvah. You don't have nemsa. What's the halacha? Says the Mishnah Kol Ta'iru Shenasa Al Gabo of Lemafreya. Anything that went into this mikvah Lemafreya, Bim Shayachad, Bim Arabim, Timeyos. It goes backwards. So Shmuel over here is teaching us that we assume only this precise moment is when she became Bagares. Says the Gemara, how do you reconcile that with the Mishnah Mikvahs? That clearly allows us to wind back the clock a little bit. Explains the Gemara, shiny us in that case is different. Dikal and Meimar Hamid. Tamei al chazkasi. In that case, it's a different chazaka, that the item was tamei before it went in to the mikvah. Ask the Gemara, what do you mean? Veimer loy tavel. And therefore we could assume it didn't go into the mikvah. Says the Gemara, Adarabba, Hemin mikvah chazkasi. The mikvah itself had a chazaka, veimer loy chasar. That is not lacking in its kosher. Harei chas levanecha. Says the Gemara, how can you tell me there's a chazaka as to the status of the mikvah? Right now, it's chaser, it's not kosher. Says the Gemara, Chanam eri bageres levanecha. So to Bayash, she's a bageres right now. Hashtu de bagra. So finally explains the Gemara as follows. Hasanami, hashtu de chaser. Right now, the mikvah is lacking. So finally says the Gemara, you know the chilik, the difference, the very precise difference in defining factor between this case of mikvah versus our case of accepting Kiddushin. Hasam in the case of mikvah tarti l'reyusa, hacha chada l'reyusa. Says the Gemara, we have a fundamental difference between the case of the mikvah and our case. In the case of the mikvah, it's tarti l'reyusa. There are two reasons to say that everything is a tar. That being that everything was prior tamei, and the mikvah lemaisa we see is lacking. So two reasons to say that it's not a tahar. Hachab, in our case of Shmuel, chada l'reyusa, there's only one reyusa in front of us, that she's currently a bagares, and that is going to be the chilik between the two cases. Asks the Gemara, okay, you answered up one statement of Shmuel, let's try again. On the first wide line, asked the Gemara, Shmuel, my shina mi chavis, the Italian learned in a price, you're buying the gaza chavis. Laver shalad shuma, you're checking the chavis, the barrel, to utilize it to separate shuma from it, from something else, a gift from here. And he goes, and you find that it's not wine. So what do? Because you separate all these shumos onto this barrel of wine, but it's not wine. It's chaimitz, it's vinegar. Says the brisa that we're quoting in the third wide line, Ayin Tesam and Aleph, Kol Gimel Yamim Vade. For 3 days we roll back the clock. Mikan Ve'elach Safek. For Aminan Chavis HaMikvos. We have a stira internally. We're trying to roll this back to eventually ask in Shmuel. It says the Gemara, how do we reconcile the case of Chavis to the case of Mikvah? Ma'ishna Da'acha Vade, Ma'ishna Da'acha Safek. Remember, Chanina Misura. Man Tana Chavis, who is that Tana? Rabbi Shimoni. Tigabi Mikvah Nami Sveika Mishave. He also holds the case of the Mikvah to Safek. The Tanya called the Irish and Asal Gabalim Freya Bim Rabim Tameos. That's the Tanakama we quoted a moment ago. But Rav Shimon Aimer says Rav Shimon Bershos Harabim Tahiros. Sayachet Toilin. So Shimon is holding it's a Safek. Avol Rabbanon Tevelim Afreya. So says the Gemara that according to the Rabbanon who clearly argue on Rav Shimon, it's going to be Tevelim Afreya. So we're assuming that Shmuel is going to go with the sheet of the Rabbanon and not Rav Shimon. And therefore, we should say it goes back to the beginning of the day. Tevelim Afreya over here. She should be assumed to be a Bagares for her the whole day. Explains the Gemara, no, Kasha, shiny also 4 lines to the bottom. Over there, you could say the Tevel as Chazaka wasn't fixed yet. Ask the Gemara, Adarabba, say the wine wasn't vinegar yet. But right now it is chaimitz. Says the Gemara, Hashtu debar. Hachanami hashtu dechmetz. Maybe only right now became vinegar. Hasam tar to the rusa chachada l'reyusa. So concludes the Gemara again. The difference is in the math game, one is 2 reyusas, whereas one in the case is Shmuel's case is only 1 reyusa. Says the Gemara. Says the Gemara, Neima Kitanais. We have a machlokes Rav and Shmuel. We tried to ask multiple kashas on Shmuel. Shmuel deflected. And now as we turn over to Ayin Tesam and Beis, ask the Gemara, Neima Kitanai. Let us suggest that this machlokes Rav and Shmuel is not an isolated machlokes Rav and Shmuel, but rather this is a larger machlokes Tanaim. Says the Gemara on top of Ayin Testament base, me moitzi miyad me. And the Tabrashi reminds us of the case if someone writes all his possessions to someone else and he leaves nothing over. We're talking about a shchimara, someone on their deathbed that can't give away a matana. So mi moitzi miyad me, who moitzi miyadam. Says the Brisa over there, who moitzi miyadam vehi ve'ein moitzi miyadam. Who has to take for them and they do not take from him. Divrei Rabbi Yankiv. We'll see in contrast what's going on over here. Rav Nosson Omer in Bario. Alav laviraya shayesh chemera v'im shchemeravu aleihem laviraya sheberia. We see who has the chazaka, who has the burden of proof to bring the proof. Says the Gemara, Nema Rav Acha Damer Rav Nosson. So Rav Damer Rav Nosson, the machlekes Rav and Shmuel. Let us suggest that Rav is going within the sheet of Rav Nosson and Shmuel Damer Rav Yaakov, and it fits very nicely. So why are we saying it's a Naya machlekes Rav and Shmuel? Says the Gemara, this brayso that we just quoted, the machlekes Rav Yaakov and Rav Yaakov and Rav Nosson should be the same machlokes. Explains the Gemara 8 lines down, Ayin Testament base. First line is Yaakov. Omar l'cha Rav anadam yafilu kirev Yaakov. Says Rav, don't start making me and Shmuel into machlokes Rav Yaakov and Rav Nosson. It's not emes. Says Rav, I could hold even like Rav Yaakov. Why? Ad can no come Rav Yaakov Hasam. Excuse me. Only over there, it is a chazak of the money. That's why Rav disagrees. Shmuel Amar and Shmuel says the same. Don't make me into machlokes. Shmuel Amar Nadami, I feel Rav Nosson. And Kanu Kam Rav Nosson awesome. Only the Kuli Alma B'Cheskes Briim. Everyone has chazaka that they are healthy. Kaima. Man to come mabing nafshem mechazaka havi alei lo siye raya. But in our case, mika nafka nafshem mechazaka dekamei, and therefore suggests therefore the Gemara proves that the machlekes Rav and Shmuel is not based on this prior machlekes of Rav Nosson and Rav Yaakov. Continues the Gemara, Neima Kehani Tanai. Let's say that the machlekes Rav and Shmuel is like this machlekes Tanaim, as follows: Kitcha via baderech, kitcha atzabi. Said the Mishnah, if the father accepted Kiddushin on the road and she accepted for herself, a rehiba geres tani chada rehiba geres lefaneinu. Tani idach hashin l'kedusha sheneim. So we have two braysos weighing in on the precise din in our Mishnah, whether we're chayshesh for both of them, or whether we go by the chazaka of Bageres Lefaneinu. Says the Gemara, my love, Chad Kirav, that this is indeed the machlekes Rav and Shmuel. V'chad Kishmuel, says the Gemara, lo, I divide Kishmuel, kam b'machshavta, kam b'shein machshavta. It's a different case. One is which is when the Eidim contradict what others said prior. One is where they do not. Nisa, like he says, okay, Gavaldik. If you're now reconciling that there's no machlekes in the Mishnah itself, so let's suggest Amaroi Namilot Lugi. Let's suggest that the Amaroi also do not argue. Says the Gemara, Tizbra, is that true? Harav Yosef Brei Derav Menashe B'Devel Avad of the Kavasei Derav. He basking like Rav, and guess what? Vik with Shmuel. Shmuel's of Sev. Amakuli Ama Kaili Lebe Kava Zuta. Everyone gets one kav. Vaymi Derbani Kaili Bekava Rabba. He's so smart that he can be makel in such a scenario. But what are we proving from here? That Rav and Shmuel clearly held like their case. V'Yizal Gadaitach Leibli. For you to tell me there was no machlekes, Amaika Makbid. Why was Shmuel caring? Says no, Dilma ki avad uvda b'machshav. Maybe the case was where they contradict each other. Amli marzuchel Ravashi, hachi amar meimar. Even though we have a little bit of a suggestion that Rav and Shmuel not arguing, the Gemara takes over Rashi that they are. The Gemara paskins halchsa kavasei de Shmuel. Ravashi amar halchsa kavasei de Rav. So you have a machlekes how we paskin. The Gemara itself concludes halchsa kavasei de Rav. And now we continue with the Mishnah on the bottom of Ayin Testament base. Says the Mishnah, he and his wife went overseas, and then They all return. And the husband says, Isha shiatza yimi limdina sayam. The woman that went with me, Hare Hizu, this is she. These are her children. Ein sarich lavi raya. You don't have to bring a raya. Lo ya'ala isha v'lo ya'ala banim. If a husband leaves with the wife, he comes back with the wife and kids. We can assume it's all one big happy family, and there's no problem. Says the Mishnah further, Meisa, if he comes back by himself with the kids and he says she died, Ve'elu banel, and these are her children, maybe Rabbanan is being proof on the kids. Ve'ena maybe Isha has to bring a raya from her, because when they got married, he proved that she was good. Isha nasati b'dina sayam areizu. So it says they married a woman overseas, and this is her Ve'elu banel, meaning he left single. He comes back with a woman and kids. Says the Mishnah, maybe Isha v'inzach lavi raya labanim. Brings a raya on the wife that she's a ksheira. He doesn't have to bring a raya on the kids. And finally, Mesa, if he says that she died overseas, then Isha. So 3 cases in the Mishnah. Let's just begin. The Gemara says, the Gemara Amar Rabba Rav Huna. And in all the cases that we have a credibility that these kids belong to this woman, says the Gemara, is when the kids are cleaving after her, then we have a raya that they're indeed her kids. Says the Bryce of so and says I married a woman overseas. Maybe raya Isha is bring a raya on the woman. Doesn't have to bring a raya on the kids. Maybe raya like you don't have to bring a raya on the little kids, only the big kids. But 3 lines of the Bana Bishach. As when he marries one, Aval B'shtei Nashim. Then maybe Raya Leisha Ve'ala Banim Ve'ala Gidon V'Alktan, then he has to bring a proof on all the kids, because you never know which is their mother. Amar Reish Lakish, and says Reish Lakish as we conclude, turning over to Daf Pei. Lo Ishanu, that this din of the credibility of the husband is only, says Reish Lakish, because Sheyagvol Avol Be'yochsin. Lo, it's not the same din. Rav Yochanan Amar Afilu Be'yochsin. I'll pick it up from here, debating whether this credibility of the father to testify this is wife and kids, whether this is also for Yochsin or only for Kache Agvolsam Karbanai. So we'll stop over here. I'll pick it up from Daf Pei in the next year of Siyata Tishmaya.